So what a privilege it is to be here at Earth X. I think this is the first time I've been on the main stage, so I'll try to get it right. Starting with a view of Earth, and just a thought. There are a lot of people who would like to go to visit that red planet, and I say good luck with that. I've got my list of those I would like to see. Maybe you have a list too. But really, when I see an image of this sort, I think how lucky we are to have that blue planet. It's taken a long time to get from rocks and water to the planet that now is favorable to us. The last 10,000 years have been particularly suitable for the likes of us. It's when our numbers went from a few thousand to a few million, and here we are with 8 billion of us. Starting in 1500, it was only half a billion, and by 1800, 1 billion. When I came along, 2 billion. Now I have a great-grandson who is thriving so far with 8 billion of us on the blue planet. We hope that this planet stays favorable to us, but we have not been very kind to that system that keeps us alive. First of all, our life support system is nature. When you go in a little capsule up in the sky as an astronaut, you have a little group of instruments, cylinders with the right breathing mix and all of that. You can't stay in the space station unless you take your life support system with you. And I've had the pleasure of going in the other direction, using little submarines where you have to take your life support with you. Here, we just breathe. We have temperature that's within a range that generally is favorable to us. But outside that little envelope, our planetary boundaries, it gets pretty unfriendly very fast. So we didn't know this. I didn't know this as a kid. But the kids of today are living in a world where there is knowledge. Not everybody is tuned in to the knowledge that's there. In fact, I can't imagine anybody learning everything that's there. But we can all, get the general principles that we have to take care of nature because nature keeps Earth safe. It made it possible from the starter mix of rocks and water over 4.5 billion years, and here we are. It's taken us about 4.5 decades to significantly unravel those ancient systems. Good news, we know it. We have knowledge that did not and could not exist before. And we have time, but not a lot of time, to look at what we're doing and take the action that we can now take to understand that we have consumed about half of the land, the wild places, and converted them for our purposes. We're doing the same thing in the ocean, converting wildlife that we thought, when I was a kid, you could never run out of whales, you could never run out of tuna, you could never run out of the creatures in the sea, because the sea is so big. It's 98%, 97% at least of the water on the planet. And where life on Earth occurs, it's the ocean. And until fairly recently, we just didn't worry. Converting nature to suit us, it's always seemed like a good idea. Places for us to live, places for us to grow food, places for us to build roads and do whatever, to put lights in the night sky. When you think how long we have been around 300,000 years or so, more or less. But without this kind of scene, without an illuminated night, people can grow up and spend their whole life and not know there's a Milky Way up there all the time that we can see at sea, away from the lights that we've created. But it's such a gift to know these things and still have time on our watch. Some say the next 10 years could be the most important in the next 10,000 years. Whatever it is, knowing is the key, that everything that any of us care about, your health, the economy, your very existence, and the existence of those coming along. I don't know about you and your families, but I have 3 children, I have 4 grandsons, and I have a little 3-year-old great-grandson. And it really motivates me, not only to think about, about their future, but also to think where I was when I was 3 years old, and what the world was like then as compared to today's world. So I started out as a young, nerdy scientist. I wanted to know everything about everything, which is most kids are like that. I just never quite grew up. I'm still like that. I want to know everything about everything. Everybody should want to know, but sometimes you get locked into patterns and you forget to look up or around and think about how incredible it is that we exist at all. And somehow, living in Florida as a kid and diving in to that Gulf by whatever name, and getting to see the creatures that are there, and later to get to go into cold water places as a botanist. That's what I just love critters of all sorts, and have had a chance to explore using microscopes, using scuba, getting to dive in and see where oxygen comes from and look at the food chain. Where does food come from? It starts with sunlight, carbon dioxide, green things on the land and in the sea that then consume animals, that consume other animals, and pretty soon, you see all these little creatures are munching on the phytoplankton and on one another. And occasionally you're lucky to get out there and see the food chain in action and not be a part of it. Be a witness. It's exciting because this is how the world works. It's the elements of the universe passing from one creature to another, always putting nutrients back into the system that powers the green things, whether it's on the land with birds flying, eating insects or plants and putting nutrients back that power the plants. And I appreciate that I'm really fortunate to arrive when I have on the planet when scuba was just getting started, and then to be able to live underwater. I've done this 10 times. We're camping, you just go and stay underwater and live inside of this chamber like the space station, but it's so easy to get outside. And getting outside the space station is a pretty big deal. Not everybody gets to do it. But when you live underwater, that's the whole point. So you have access to the sea day and night and spend hours out there. That certainly led me to want to go see what's below where you can go breathing compressed air or exotic mixes of gases. Here in Texas, the idea of perfecting the fine art of breathing mixed gas to be able to go out and service oil wells and pipelines and things really made that investment that scientists and explorers have benefited from. The idea that you can stay underwater, that you can go deeper, just breathing compressed air, but to go really deep below where divers can go. You need to package yourself like an astronaut so that you don't feel the pressure. So you can have one atmosphere, the same pressure that we have in this room, inside your diving suit. And that leads to little submarines. And I've had the pleasure of using more than 30 different kinds of submarines and working with engineers to design and come up with ideas for, okay, so you want to go in the ocean, what do you want to do while you're there? To have manipulators, to have instruments, to have cameras that you can actually photograph what you see. And as a consequence, I've had the pleasure of thousands of hours in the ocean. And I recognize not everybody gets to do this. So I'm driven when I can to come and speak to people about what they're missing. And maybe this is a time. It's like the early days of aviation, when people thought it was scary to go up in the sky. You know, you could get killed if one of those things falls out of the sky. But now, you know, everybody, millions of people, just step on as if you're getting into a car and you fly 7 miles in the sky. But we're right at this point when it's becoming expected. You can go underwater, and if you do not like getting wet, get into a submarine and go deeper than divers can go. For 5 years, working with the National Geographic, we had a chance with the Goldman Foundation and with NOAA, the agency where I served as the chief scientist in the 1990s. We had this project to be able to go to all of the marine sanctuaries in this country, and we tiptoed down to Mexico and also into Belize, and took people under the sea using little one-person subs to be able to explore. Sometimes I've had a chance to go and give government officials, like in this case, the Minister of the Environment from Ecuador, and he was a little apprehensive, you might be, but a big mulla came by and whispered in his ear, and it kind of gave him a new way of thinking about what you could see and do when you're submerged. There's so many creatures out there that unless you can get down there, if you're lucky enough to catch one in the net, dragging it through the ocean, it gets squished. They're just soft creatures that can exist when they're held in place by water, but as soon as you take them out of the water, they just dissolve into a blob. So it's being in the ocean, seeing these creatures on their own terms. It gives us new insight into what's the ocean all about. When I was a kid, there were growing concerns that sea turtles had been consumed by us to the point where there's a chance that they could be gone within our time. But in fact, people have seen turtles with a different attitude, different values. There's now an attitude of protection for turtles, and there are more right here in Texas and all over the world. There's a different attitude. Yes, some people still do dine on turtles of all sorts, but sea turtles, there are 8 species. They've been around since the time of dinosaurs, and they're still here. They can still be here if we take care of them. But there's more than one way to kill a turtle. And one of the things that has happened in my lifetime is the invention of these wonderful materials that now infiltrate and support our lives in so many ways. I'm probably wearing some plastic right now. But too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. Imagine if we didn't know that we've created something that if we really handle it with care, we might be able to continue to live with plastics and other synthetic materials that have become so much a part of our lives. But they're a part now of all of us. I mean, the microplastics, the nanoplastics that happen when all of this stuff that we don't keep where it can be recycled or reused, it gets tossed into the ocean and then comes back to us. A legacy of fishing on a scale that has never been possible before the 21st century. Fishing has been a part of human civilization probably as long as there have been humans. We used to dine on wildlife as a principal means of supporting ourselves. But in the last 10,000 years, part of the reason is that there's so many of us, we learned how to grow food. We still take wildlife from the land, but we kind of gotten away from taking birds by the ton. We haven't with the ocean. We still expect the ocean to deliver the way we used to take birds from the sky, and not that long ago. I mean, I didn't live in a time when passenger pigeons were here, or many of the other creatures that have, in my time, gone extinct. Will we see the end of squid because of the squid fishers that are out there, like moving cities with lights that illuminate the sky when you're way out in the high seas beyond where nations have jurisdiction? We didn't know that we had the capacity to strip the ocean of life. But this Gulf out here, when I was a kid, there were seals, monk seals, that prospered in the Gulf. They're gone. When I was in high school, the last one was seen. They used to lounge on the beaches around Miami. They came as far north as Galveston, went as far south as Brazil. But on the time of humans coming from Europe to North America, they're just gone, everyone. So we can do a great deal about restoring some things, like birds are coming back, not all of them, but eagles are back. But if we take on the ocean with kind of mechanized extraction, those creatures, literally, they don't have a chance. We could take all of the squid. We could take all of the whales. We almost did take all of the whales, but we stopped in time. The last time when whaling was considered to be something to celebrate, and it was true when I was a kid, whaling was celebrated. Now we know there's something more to a whale than pounds of meat and barrels of oil. We came very close to knowing whales only as museum specimens. That's what I think about when I think about my 3-year-old great-grandson. We have the chance to have a future that will have whales, that will have the things that we now kind of take for granted. Or we can lose the chance. Sharks, for example, they've been around for 400 million years. But on our watch, since 1980, they have gone from here, some species down to a fraction of 1% remaining. The short fin mako is one example. Great white sharks, greatest predator on the planet, right? No, I think we ought to be looking in the mirror to find the greatest predator on the planet, because we have harnessed technology to find, to capture, and to market globally. Anything that we take from anywhere has the capacity to go anywhere else. And that's a good thing in economic terms, but only if we learn how to use that system responsibly. Global markets are fine, but to understand that there are limits to how much of the wild we can take without wrecking the systems that keep us alive. It's the way we used to look at whales. The only good shark was a dead shark. Tuna, we don't value a live tuna. It's only a dead tuna that we can sell or eat. And I think about, if fish really knew how we regard them, they might be a little worried. So it's up to us, I think, because we know what they don't. We have the capacity to look at the world and see What elephants, as smart as they are, they cannot see or know what 10-year-olds of today know. And those of us who are a little bit beyond 10 years old have more time to learn things, to see how it all comes together. There are people, champions, communities, coming together, working with governments to protect areas in the ocean. You could say it's a bit like national parks, but not all of these spots on a map, hope spots, are really protected, except by the people who have made a commitment to do what they can to safeguard places they love and to really understand why it matters. To every breath you take, every drop of water you drink, we have to protect and give back to nature, knowing that that's what keeps us alive. First priority, we have to stay alive. And we're in a trajectory right now of consuming the earth, and we turn nature into wealth, which has always seemed like a good thing, natural resources. But again, too much of a good thing can be a scary thing. And right now, looking at the possibility of taking that last great wilderness in the deep sea and using it as a place to mine those nodules on the sea floor to extract a few metals that are useful now, but are fast losing their usefulness as we find new ways to have batteries that don't require lithium or cobalt or some of the other metals that are in the deep sea and on the land where we've been mining them, but thinking it through, understanding this is how the world works. What kind of a world, what kind of a future do we want for the rest of our lives, let alone all those coming in the future? The idea that you can inspire people to create places that they commit to doing something, to safeguard it, to keep it safe, or to restore some of the damage that's been done. That's what I've been doing with Mission Blue, but it's not just Mission Blue, it's everyone everywhere to do something, whether it's in your backyard, with your state, your country, or thinking on a global scale. What can anybody do? Everybody has some power. And at this place, it's in the shadow of New York City, Shinnecock Bay, Hope Spot, where people have lived in harmony with nature, literally for thousands of years. But about in the 1800s, as people began to move into these places that were just those who had lived in harmony and taking over, New York City, the millions of people who live in an area that once supported a few thousand, the markets were not just local, they became widespread. The clams, the oysters, the fish that were in the area were stripped away. It didn't take that long, because by the 21st century, brown tides swept the bay. Fish were dying. And you can see some of the shells of the oysters, but it's true with the clams as well. Some scientists there, one in particular, Ellen Pickett, who's a scientist at Stony Brook University. She and her colleagues crunched the numbers, and they figured that, look, what we really need is a filtration system. The clams. It would take 53 million clams, they figured, to do what it takes to filter the water that was causing those brown tides. One clam would cost $1, and they didn't have $53 million. So they took what they had, planted them in the bay, and then protected them. It took 5 years, and the mom and dad clams doing their thing. But today, 10 years later, oops, I think I missed a slide, but the water is clear. And the clams are there. They've started to do the same thing with oysters. Planting oysters so you can clean the Gulf, clean Chesapeake Bay, clean San Francisco Bay. It's an idea that is really an idea whose time has come. Giving back, helping to restore nature. This scene is from a little island, a group of islands off the coast of Chile. I first got to go there as a kid scientist in 1965. It was thought at the time that the seals had all been taken, that they were extinct because they had beautiful fur coats that we admired and took the seals because they had furry coats. But we found one, which meant if there's one seal, there have to be at least two others. And a big program was initiated to try to find out where they were in the islands, and they found a small colony, protected it. I was back there in December, and there are now more than 100,000 of these seals that have recovered. I mean, like, it works, it does. Like the whales, they've come back. They're not where they used to be, but they're better than they were when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I played around in those seagrass meadows in the Gulf. And little by little, we, one species, we have consumed most of the Florida coast. But there's an arc from Panama City down to just north of Tampa Bay. It's the wilderness coast where manatees still are out there grazing, doing what they do to not only thrive, but they give nutrients back to the system. It's true with all living things. It's a cycle of life. And there's still a chance to save that wilderness coast, because it's basically the last wild coast in all of Florida. Now, there are other places here and there, all along the coastline of this country, all along the coastline of the countries around the world. But we really have to hurry, because, again, the trajectory that I've witnessed from where creatures mostly were coral reefs, now about half of them gone, seagrass meadows globally, kelp forests, are going like this. And unless we really take seriously the idea that it matters, that there are economic, health, security benefits to protecting nature, I mean, why isn't it obvious? Why isn't everybody looking around in your backyard or in your city or wherever you have some influence, some power, to use whatever superpower you've got, because everybody has something, to take care of the systems that make everything we care about possible. And it's happening. Right now, there are 169 hope spots with champions, with communities, with government support in many cases. 29 of them have places where champions are using some of these new techniques for cultivating coral and then planting it in places where coral has been missing in action because of us, by places where we've taken the fish, taken the animals that the reefs need, or just displacing the corals. And of course, the warming trend is not very good for corals either. But by taking action, growing the corals, planting them, recovery turns out to be possible. Not always, but it's working. That what you see here is a replanted reef where not so long ago it was barren. The high seas, beyond where national jurisdiction extends, 200 miles out, even in the Gulf of whatever, there's a little bit of high seas that Mexico, Cuba, and the United States come together 200 miles, and then there's this little space that is high seas. But globally, it's half the world. And just in the past year, a high seas treaty that has enlisted the commitment of enough countries so that it has become a ratified treaty to protect at least 30% of half the world beyond national jurisdiction, the global commons, the system that generates oxygen, captures carbon, provides homes for wildlife. And it is vulnerable to shipping. 90% of everything goes by sea these days, and to high seas fishing that is stripping the ocean of life on a scale that's never been possible before to markets that haven't existed before. And you think about the Arctic. At the height of the Cold War in the 1950s, the continent of Antarctica, nations came together at this really sensitive time of tense moments. They agreed to safeguard the whole continent for peaceful use. What a concept. But they forgot the ocean. And as soon as it was possible, and it's only in the 20th and now into the 21st century, that people have been going really to capitalize on taking wildlife. Actually, 200 years, because 1820 is when the Antarctic continent was first seen. And the first ones to do it were the sealers. They started taking seals. And then they took the penguins. And then they took deep sea fish. And now they're taking krill. That's like the cornerstone out of the whole system, because that's food for everybody, for the penguins, for the whales, for the whole system. It's something we need to think about and try to look. A few individuals, a few countries, a few companies are disproportionately extracting from the high seas global commons that surround Antarctica. Because people don't know about it or understand what the consequences, the carbon cycle is invested in the food webs. The whole idea of generating oxygen, capturing carbon, is at risk when we go with large-scale vessels from the northern hemisphere all the way to the other end of the world to take the cornerstone of the life support system for the wild animals that we protect on the land, but we fail to protect the food source when they're in the ocean. At the other end of the world, the Arctic, both of the polar regions are critical to maintaining Earth the way we like it. You know, there's some creatures who've lived on Earth when it's a lot hotter than it is now, but it's not really favorable to us. We need the ice, we need the polar systems to stay intact and realize this is not just a physical phenomenon. It's not just about hot and cold. Living systems that capture carbon, living systems that generate oxygen, living systems that make our existence possible. If we didn't know, it would be one thing. But we do know, and we can take action. I mean, I say, we can take action? Well, who else is going to take action? Our grandkids? 50 years from now, we'll lose a chance to do what's possible now. We didn't know enough 50 years ago to do what's now within our grasp. So, why am I here at this conference? Because I'm with people who care, or otherwise you wouldn't be here. All those others who aren't here should listen up. And we need to listen to one another. What are the solutions? How can we have a robust economy that doesn't really continue to take from nature? Can't we find a way to give back and still have really good sources of revenue? Here's one example. It's in motion right now. There's a fabulous resort, the Brando. They started protecting turtles. And this is about 20 years ago. There were only a few turtles that came there to nest, but they did a vigorous protection system. And the turtles began to respond. It takes time because turtles, they don't even start to lay eggs until they're in their late teens. They can live as long as we do. Easy to kill them, but to get them to recover, you really have to work at it, protect the nests. And of course, it helps not to kill the moms and dads as well. But now there are hundreds of nests where not so long ago, it looked as though they would be gone. There are more turtles as well as nests. And it happens because the people who come there to enjoy the resort, to enjoy the beautiful, clear blue water, to go diving, or to go dining, just to enjoy Tahiti and the surrounding waters. This is at Tetiaroa. They have a little marine lab, a nonprofit called the Tetiaroa Society. And it's a model where people come, and part of what they give to enjoy paradise helps protect paradise, helps protect the turtles, helps protect the reefs, giving back to the reefs. And they're connecting as well with Mission Blue and with the Tetragoa Society to connect with the Polynesian people. Their country, historically, little tiny specks of land across the Pacific, but it's mostly a blue country with different populations, different customs, but held together by a common past and a common present extending into the future, where Polynesian culture and languages, they're coming together partly because they want to recover something of their cultural habits of caring, of understanding that the ocean is their source of life. And what you see in this image, a traditional Polynesian voyaging canoe that connected the people across the Pacific. Some of the ancient maps take the form of an octopus with arms extending to Hawaii, to Easter Island, to Bora Bora, to New Zealand. But the head of the octopus is right there in Tetiaroa, in French Polynesia, in Tahiti. And that's where the chiefs would come together to deliberate policies that ultimately would affect people across the Pacific. And now, in very recent times, like this year, 2 little submersibles will be based there to be able to take the Polynesian voyagers to see what's under the canoe. For thousands of years, they've been looking up here. Now they can see who's living under the surface. And it isn't just the Polynesian voyagers. Think about it. Think about how recent it is that we've been able to fly high in the sky, and how recent it is that we've been able to go below where you can go holding your breath. We're the luckiest generation of humans, and the kids coming along. But we have a chance to safeguard their world, our world, the world that will be around 10,000 years from now. Or we can tip the scales and go over the edge, which is what I worry about. That's why I'm here. Because I think about the chance we have, the best chance we'll ever have, to safeguard what keeps civilization, all of us, alive. If we fail to do it, we're so close to getting beyond the point of no return. We're not there yet, but we could get there if we keep doing what we're doing, or we could explore. We could keep learning. These images show in the center the way reefs were 50 years ago. There are scientists, photographers who were there taking those images. Now they're going back to see what's happened. It's a trajectory of rapid decline, and it is happening everywhere. We're losing coral reefs, but we're also saving them. And so what I hope for our time, I mean the next 5 years, next 10 years, we can accelerate recovery, and we can accelerate protection for those places that are still in great shape. Wherever your home is, look around. There are places you can convert a lawn into wildflowers. You can get your city to look at their water policy or their disposal policy. There's no waste in nature, but we've created a real problem that hadn't existed before our time. These devastated reefs have hope. They can be recovered if we protect the fish, if we give them a jump start. This is what I remember as a kid when I first began exploring the ocean. It's there to be done. I mean, for me, but for the kids of the future, too. Thank you for what you're doing to change this trajectory that we're on right now, like this. There's reason for hope right here, right now. Thank you.